raise, but also to bring communities together, of disparate communities with disparate topics, to give sort of an opportunity to come and talk about some of these things. Also, we firmly believe in the idea of we will remember them. So sometimes the stories are very small, they're about individuals. Sometimes they're bigger stories, collective stories. But it's important to us that we will remember them. It's a frame which we use every time we sit together to decide what topics we're going to have. And that's why they're so eclectic. We are extremely, extremely pleased to be able to have Warrant Officer Cullen here today. This topic has been on our radar screen for some period of time, and we were so thankful that he agreed to do this. I don't normally do bios. I normally just say, well, we put it on the newsletter, but today I'm going to, because to me I think it's important that we highlight a few things today about Warrant Officer Cullen. So I'm going to go first with some notes so I don't screw this up. First of all, I think it's important to note that he's a highly decorated 28-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, who served as the master sniper and recently co-authored the book, Send It, Canadian Snipers at War in Afghanistan. Throughout his distinguished career, Warrant Officer Cullen has established himself as one of the most respected senior non-commissioned NCOs and leaders within the Canadian sniper community. I want to highlight some of the units that he's worked. Obviously, he's been with the 1 RCR. He's also served with 3 RCR. He's also served with Lake Superior Scottish Regiment, and of course, CANSOFCOM, Canadian Special Operations Forces Command. He has extensive deployment experience, including 2 tours in Bosnia, 1 in Kosovo, and 3 tours in Afghanistan, and a short, it turns out, deployment in Poland. I will not highlight all his sniper roles, but I will tell you that he eventually rose to the service, the battle group's master sniper for 2 task forces, I understand it, in Afghanistan, and later became the sniper program manager for special operations. So, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you this afternoon Warrant Officer Cullen.
Thanks so much. Before we get kicked off, I just want to acknowledge the efforts of Louise and the Friends of the Canadian War Museum as a volunteer group and all the things they do to raise funds and support the Canadian War Museum, which is an amazing institution. I also want to thank my wife of 31 years, 2 wonderful children, one of which is sitting there, who sat through 7 deployments, however many courses and competitions, and is still here as my rock. So thank you. So I tried to add a little levity to the presentation, and I encourage, I know it's a presentation, but I encourage it more of a discussion. If you have something that you want to ask, or there's something on the screen that interests you and you want to ask a question about it, or there's something I say that you would like me to expand further upon, I encourage you to, I won't feel interrupted, I'll feel engaged. So please feel free. I would enjoy it. So my background, as Louise outlined, I did my basic sniper course in 1999 for the gentleman here in the room. And that was kind of the launching point for me as a sniper. We did a number of competitions, exercises building up towards our deployment to Kosovo, which is significant, I think, because Kosovo, for snipers, was really the last time that we deployed in pairs. The threat in Kosovo is what we would call a semi-permissive environment now. Back then, what we were faced with, maybe we didn't see it so much that way. But after that tour, moving into the Afghanistan era, and the continued escalation of threat in that theater, we had to grow as a group from 2 to 4. Post-Kosovo, we came back, trained, did all the normal things, got better, shot more competitions, and got ready for what we found out very shortly thereafter would be our time in Afghanistan. My next deployment was 2003, and I was sent to Kabul, Afghanistan, up on top of a terrible little hill called TV Tower Hill, as the only infantier up there, with all the accoutrements that I would bring to it as a Canadian sniper. And in those 9 months on that hill, I managed to come down 3 times. So it was a growing experience. But that experience for me as a sniper also gave me a wealth of information because of the people I got to deal with. So that was my first real interaction with JTF-2, because it was their job to come up and then work out a plan for us to get off that hill safely, should everything go to hell. And the knowledge that I gained from them as professionals, I was able to take into future deployments when we talked about threat, designated area of rescue, how to plan for these things so that when we get into the next theater, which I deployed in 2006 as the Battle Group Master Sniper, to Kandahar, Operation Medusa. It took some of the edge off some of the planning. Still not 100% prepared for what we saw there, especially as a sergeant doing battle group operations. Standing in a room with a general, colonel, a very focused colonel, being Omer Luboy, planning for the next biggest operation since Korea. And then what do we do with the snipers? So having that background, having the group that I was with, the planning, the preparation, I was able to successfully plan our operations in support of the battle group for that first part of Operation Medusa, which was an incredibly kinetic and life-changing operation, and then also tour with the follow-on actions. So I would say that was my opportunity as a sniper, master sniper, to cut my teeth and understand what is war. Because Kosovo now looked a little permissive, and Kandahar was not. In Kosovo, we could sit in an OP for 4 days, unobstructed, doing our job, reporting in and out, nobody sees us. Kandahar, you move a rock, you're getting mortared. The escalation of force that we saw in 2006 was incredibly life-altering, but it also shaped how we did our business. So we were able to come back off that tour with all these lessons learned, pass them on to other battle groups, educate other battalions, other deployments, and then get ready again to go in 2010, which I was the Battle Group Master Sniper one more time. And in that tour, the kinetic operations weren't so kinetic. We had to pay a lot more attention to collateral damage, and our job as snipernettes was much more instrumental. So where in 2006, we could call in a fire mission and completely decimate an area, because all that was in that area were bad people. In 2010, all the good people came back. So we had to be a little bit more surgical in what we did. Which I think laid the groundwork for the rest of my career, not only in the military, but as a sniper. So in 2016, I was asked, it's okay. 2016, I was asked by a good friend if I would come over to CSOR, Canadian Special Operations Regiment, and help develop their plan for force generation. Up until that point, CANSOF, CSOR specific snipers, or who was selected to be a sniper, would have to come and do the Green Army Basic Sniper Course. So we saw a number of them come into our training path, And unfortunately, some failed, which is not what they're looking for. Not because they're better trained, but because they put a lot of dollars into those people and they need them to be successful, to carry through. So in 2016, I went to CSOR as the sniper program manager, and we developed I'll call it a Zero to Hero course for CSOR snipers. So the operators that would come through the system and that were still volunteering to carry on with the sniper path would have the opportunity to take a basic sniper course that would run them through all the basics that they weren't ready for. Again, remembering that CANSOFCOM draws from the entire military, so that sniper candidate could be a clerk or an Air Force technician. So take them from that understanding of military operations all the way up to being employed within a SOF squadron as a sniper in support of a direct action. So knowing nothing about sniping to being the very tip of the pointy end on a kinetic operation is what we achieved through developing that course. I stayed in that position till 2021, and it was a very rewarding opportunity. We brought in a number of different calibers of weapons, ammo, supporting equipment, thermals. We looked at how we could defeat the oncoming threat of drones, and then did a lot of liaison with other nations, a lot of work in the US with their SOF command. And there was a point during that job, and I looked around, and it was, I have nothing more to give these people. They've surpassed me in knowledge, in capability, and at some point, I'm just going to become a hurdle. So at that point in 2021 is when I decided to retire and look back and be happy with what I did as a sniper. So over all that period of time, I got to meet a couple very interesting people. One of them on the 2010 tour was Paul Gross, actor, director. And I happened to be in Kabul during their, and I always say CanCon visit, but I don't think they call it anymore, but that's what we refer to it as. And he was very interested in sniper operations. So I sat down with him for an afternoon, laid out kind of the stories and our missions, and he's like, I want to pursue this. In 2012, he released Hyena Road, which I supplied the sniper content for, which was loosely based on my DETS operations in 2006 and 2010. So this drew the attention of another fine gentleman, Mir Bahamyar. So Mir is a historian, an American historian who had moved to Canada, married a wonderful woman, Michelle, who was writing for Murdoch Mysteries and Frankie Jane and these things. And he had just finished a book on SEALs with Chris Osman, who I had interacted with in 2010. And Mir was chatting with Chris, and he's like, I want to do something in my new country. I want to do something that has impact within the military community. And Chris Osman is, call this guy, talk to him, see what you can do. So out of the blue, I got an email from Mir in 2012, looking to see, hey, I'm interested in writing a book about snipers. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm also interested in you writing a book about snipers, Canadian snipers, because we have a genuine history. And I'm going to mess up the last name because I always do, but going all the way back to Sergeant Major Yes. An incredible history from then. Another gentleman I got to meet was Ted Zuber, who was a war artist, but a sniper in Korea. I believe some of his stuff is still hanging here in the War Museum. And the interest was carrying that history through, because we as a Canadian sniper group have earned that legacy through hard work. So I was very interested in a historian bringing all this to light, and him bringing this to light. So my question to him is why? Why do you want to write this book? Like there's books out there about the longest shots. We have a number of records. What different is it that you want to bring from our community to the public? And it was a sell right away. And it was just, I want to bring the history. I don't want what you guys did in Afghanistan or any other theater that we can talk about. I don't want to let it go by the wayside and be forgotten. So that was a sell for me. I was not interested in anybody doing any chest pounding about crazy operations, crazy shots. My interest was, we did some hard stuff, and I would like it to be put out there so that the Canadian public or any other public that reads it understands that these were highly trained, motivated soldiers in support of Canadian operations that brought that same level of fight and bravery to the battlefield that was Afghanistan, that was the battlefields previous. Korea, World War II, World War I, Boer War. I wanted to see that same history, but no bravado. So that's when we started looking around. My 2IC was in 110 was Barry Nisbet, sergeant at the time. In 2006, he was one of my snipers in 6-3 Charlie. And he was very, very motivated, very dedicated sniper. And he and I kind of saw things the same. That we are here to serve the Canadian military. On operations, we support the operations. We are not the operation. There's no main effort that is snipers. Snipers support the main effort. So I brought it to him. And I said, Barry, would you be interested in having a part in this? Working with MIR to bring the history of Canadian snipers through a very small piece of Kosovo, and then our time in Kosovo, or sorry, Afghanistan, to the pages. And he's like, yes, but we need more. We need a cross-section of Canadian snipers from Afghanistan, from the PPCLI, the Bandu, and the RCR. We need all the stories. And that was the next step. So we get together and we start reaching out. Who can contribute, who will contribute to this endeavor? So I still had a lot of contacts within the Canadian sniper community, and I started reaching out and emailing, calling. Would you be interested in being interviewed by MIR? And he's going to take your story and work it into the book. And it's going to be a cross-section of snipers from 2002 to 2012. And it was hard. It was hard. Most of the time, we cloak ourselves in a bit of secrecy. And that just protects us as people. Not because we're worried about someone coming through the door and you're a Canadian sniper, we're going to hurt you. But it was more about the perception of snipers. And I'll use my wonderful neighbor as an example. She's a super lovely lady. she didn't know what I did. And we were out chatting one day. I used to make dump runs for her, clean her driveway. And we got on the topic of the Canadian Forces, and I massaged snipers in there, and her comment was, "Oh, they're murderers." And that's why. It wasn't that we were afraid of espionage or being attacked. It was being misunderstood in our role was a lot of the reason why it wasn't important that you know who we were, that we were out there doing our job. So when I started reaching out to people to ask them, a lot of it was no way. I don't want to be a part of it. But on the other hand, there were some that were, yes, I want to tell my story. It's important. We did some great things. There's people alive to this day, because of the actions that were taken in combat. And it was great. We got the list of names. I provided their contact information in confidence to Mir, and he started contacting them himself. And then it was, what stories do we want to tell? Because there's a lot of stories that have been told. Like Rob Furlong, his group with the longest shot in 2002. Amazing. But that's not what we want to do. So we want to tell the stories that demonstrate the hard work that went into getting to where we got in the battlefield. The support that we gave. Sometimes there was no shots taken whatsoever, but the impact of those actions created an effect across the battlefield. Sometimes just showing up as a sniper group in a camp, because the Afghans were super observant, would change the battlefield. We would go to a place called Balpine to support operations. And we'd set up, and for the next 2 days, it was crickets. Like just normal activity in the fields, normal activity in the streets. There was no IEDs, no what we used to call shooting suits. And it was because that message was communicated, hey, maybe not right now. Balpine, I use as an example a lot because it got hit a lot. It was probably the most active FOB in that theater at that time, of which John would know. So a lot of the time it was just the sheer presence. And then some of the other times it took a bit of activity to send that message, but it was heard. 2006, going into a strong point, we were able to go out and conduct activity, which I put in the book and I'm not going to talk about, that settled that place down for a month. There was no kinetic activity in that area for a month because of that reputation that Canadian snipers brought to the country. That's what we want. Not the lone actions or the single events, the culmination of hard work and putting ourselves out there in an environment that was completely inhospitable. And then it was, who's going to write it and who's going to read it? The easy button for us was anybody in uniform. We figured they're going to want to read this because they were there or they heard about it. They want to understand maybe that piece a little bit better. Who's going to write it? Mir. Easy. He has over a dozen books in print. Ranger books, Darby's Rangers, SEALs, well-published author, focused on bringing truthful history to the forefront. We were happy. Everybody in the community that we were dealing with was confident that this is going to be a good book. And then the last consideration is, will the community accept it? Because the snipers, as a group, through 2 levels of conversation, probably know all the snipers in the group. So it's a very close-knit community. And our biggest fear is that if we step outside the fold and we start presenting information that other snipers may not be comfortable with, or they're worried we're going to tell them how we did it and not just what we did, was our fear. And if they start speaking out, then our efforts would have no traction. It'll be completely debunked for what it is. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted their support. And after chatting with a lot of guys in the community, they're like, no, this is the time. Tell your stories, bring them to the forefront. This is a great idea. So, we spend hours and days and weeks and years of interviews with Mir. And again, an amazing mentor in the world of history and novels. But then Mir comes up one day and he's like, I can't write it. I won't do it justice. You have to write it. And that was devastating. Because it's easy to be interviewed. Because you only have to answer the questions that you're being asked. And if you're good at it, you can answer the questions in a way that you can shape the follow-on questions. So everybody enjoyed that piece, and they knew that Mir's writing style would bring quality to the pages. And now we had to contact them all and say, hey, so Mir said no. He doesn't want to write it, and we need you guys to start submitting chapters. And the interest fell. There was a number of guys who outright said, there's no way I'm not going to write that. I'm not comfortable. And there's like good reason. Because I felt the same pressure. And I'm sure anybody would, that was in difficult situations and then was now forced to recall everything. Because again, you can ask me questions and I'll answer them, but I'm going to answer your question. I don't have to present all the information. And sometimes all the information is what burdens the individual. So there is a number of snipers that are like, those are my truths, those are all mine, and I'm not ready. And you have to accept that. You can't bully them into submitting that information, because you won't get the truth, which was the very most important piece of all of this. The stories had to be true. And if they weren't, then they didn't go in the book. Or if they couldn't be verified, then they can't go in the book. Because we supported too many things. There's too many young soldiers out there that are warrants and sergeant majors and chief warrant officers now that were on the ground then. And if we make a mistake, then it doesn't just discredit us. It discredits their actions. So it was incredibly important that we stayed truthful and verifiable. And that what we brought was meaningful. And some of the stories that we wanted to tell, we didn't, because of that, because words have meaning. And I'll share an example that's not in the book. It's alluded to, but I think it will give weight to what I'm trying to explain. So in 2010, I was in Shoja. My 6-6 Alpha call sign under Barry was in Balpine, supporting their actions. And as the master sniper at the time, I would go from fob to fob to fob. I tried to stay as far away from Kandahar as I could, but that's where my people were. So I would try to anticipate where they're going to be required next. I would go there, communicate with the OCs or whoever the people on the ground were to get a better understanding, so that when the guys showed up, they were able to get a good read on and provide the best support. But that can make it a super long tour for an individual to go and not have a really tied to a job in any of the camps. I show up, talk with people, that's not enough. So I always took a 50 cal with me to do the best support I could in those locations. And in Shoja 2010, they had a tower they called the Zombie Tower in the center of camp. And for a sniper to not be able to look at the ground and watch pattern of life and develop situations is maddening. It's like sitting in front of a TV with no ability to turn it on. So I would go up in the Zombie Tower, relieve the C6 gunner up there, and I would watch the ground. And I would learn about the locals' habits and compare those with the guys, talk about what we saw, what time of day we saw things. And in one day, there was a platoon leaving from Shoja, and they were going to do a patrol. And they went west from Shoja, hooked north, and then started east. And this is ground I've watched for weeks, and I understood it. I understood the people that were there and what they did, and recognized some of them, because it's a small community. And in a split second, I recognized that there was a guy standing on top of a wall, unarmed. And he's not supposed to be there. He's never been there. And we were given very specific ROE for this situation. I'm not even going to call it ROE. Condition checks. So spotters are what the locals were now employing to gain advantage over the Canadian forces. Because with the balloons up, with the Predators and other UAS up in the air, it was very hard for them to move to a location, set up in an ambush, and then effect that ambush successfully without being detected. So what they would do is they would employ a spotter. So they would move very quietly, undercover, into a location, and then they would put a spotter up with a phone or just communicating orally. So when I identified that he's not supposed to be there, he's never been there, I don't recognize him, I went through my conditions. Is he communicating? Yeah. He very obviously was leaning back and talking behind the wall. Does he have line of sight of the enemy, or the friendly? Yeah. Have they been ambushed or attacked in this location before? Yeah. Are the friendly forces within range of that location? 100%. So I took him out. And at the second that man fell behind the wall, an ambush was initiated. Because they thought they were being engaged and started shooting over the wall sporadically. What I didn't notice right away, because it took 2 rounds, is the first round went high. He was at 2,000 meters. And he did nothing. So I had time to re-engage. But that first round sent everybody in the camp into a frenzy because they thought the camp was under attack. So the CP communicated to the patrol that the camp was being targeted, and they went to ground. The second round caught him lower left hip. And so the patrol that was in range, was already on the ground, was not impacted by the sporadic fire, and was able to close with that group and have an effect. But how do I put that as a proud Canadian sniper, hoping to demonstrate, excellence and unwavering morality into a book that could be read by a 14 to 15-year-old, and he's going to take away from that is that a Canadian sniper just shot an unarmed man, and that's hard, and that means something. So I couldn't put that in the book because I didn't want that to be the takeaway. The takeaway shouldn't be questions. It should be a sense of being proud of our Canadian forces, being proud of what we do, and not put a shadow on anything. So my experience was very similar to a lot of other snipers' experiences. So those individuals and snipers didn't feel comfortable and backed away or didn't submit those stories, and I 100% understand that for those reasons. So then we had to look at what do we have left. So we had 4 snipers still willing to contribute to the book, being myself, Barry, B, and Curtis Elby. Those were the 4 people still willing to put themselves out there for judgment. So we moved forward. And this is what we got. Looks like a book, feels like a book. Are we there yet? So the content wasn't as full as we wanted, because it became a very RCR centric book. Because unfortunately, the 2 gentlemen that we had from the Patricias, they didn't want to submit their chapters. The one guy that we had from the Vandu backed away once they did. So all 4 of the contributing authors were RCR. So we looked at the structure, and what does the Canadian public, and that's it, not the Canadian military, or what does the Canadian public need to know? So we had these stories in the background that we were ready to release about our activities in Afghanistan. But we need to tell the story first. We need to figure out how we got there. So the beginning of the book is very, and it's my fault, very dry. Because I went through what is a sniper? What does the sniper program look like? And what does the sniper have to do to get through that course? And I didn't talk about how. I didn't explain standards, it was just what. How do we get a very A-type personality, highly motivated soldier to become a sniper? So that is all laid out. But also what's laid out is all the supporting activities. So what did the weaponry look like? What were the capabilities of the weapons? How did they evolve? How did the kit? And there's a chapter in there called the Geardo, which a lot of military people will understand, is that one individual who finds it necessary to strap everything they own to their gear, whether they use it or not. So that's the Geardo. But it's important because it shows from where we deployed with, a C3, set of binos, and hopefully a good Bushnell spotting scope, to where we're thermal binoculars, our choice of weapon systems depending on the role. How did we make that transition? And I needed to lay that out, because if we started talking about operations and the things that we used in those operations, then there would be no concept of what are those things that got us there and make us successful. And then how do you finish the book? So we have the introduction being, what's a sniper, how did he get there? Stories about deployments, but there's no, what's the ending? So we looked at the current threat being the Ukraine. And Canada had a very large role in training Ukrainian snipers prior to the Russian incursion on Ukraine. And they were making significant impact with the Ukrainian snipers. So it was meaningful to put that activity in there, demonstrate where they were in the Ukraine, what kind of lessons were being learned, and then how they had to just walk away. And then knowing that these guys that they just trained are now, their learning curve is getting flattened out because they're in the battle. So the things that they learned are being now surpassed by the necessity to survive. So the lessons, the framework developed the capability that allows them to operate where they are now. Unfortunately, as we all know, I mean, the cost was large for the Ukrainian. And then, now what do we say about Canadian snipers. So we finish it off with, this is where we are now, and this is where we need to be. How do we get there? Within the sniper program, or within the battalions, or within what this modernization is going to look like that we're rolling into, snipers get left on the shelf periodically. When there isn't a conflict or something in the face of the Canadian Forces, the standard is put the snipers on the shelf, make sure they get just enough range time to stay current. So what we wanted to kind of roll up the end of the book with is we need to pay more attention to lessons learned. We can't go through the beginning of Afghanistan again, where we're learning all these wonderful lessons that we learned, how to survive and be successful. We can't take those 10 years of learning and forget it. So we talk a little bit about sharing knowledge, graying that line out between the Green Army and CANSOFCOM. Because the lessons those guys are learning with their operations are exactly what needs to be bled down to the Green Army to save them from repeating the errors. If it worked here and it was successful, tell them about it so they don't have to learn it. And that I thought was a good conclusion to the book. And first and foremost, again, I go back to when we first started thinking about the book, the expression. I am super proud of my military time. I'm proud of all the people I got to work with, the operations I went on, and that's the tone. That's the tone of the book that we wanted. There's too many publications out there that are hammering bureaucracy, hammering government. That's fine. That's not us. That's not what we want to talk about. We want the young readers to read it and feel invigorated. Think about the Canadian Forces as a path. See our history as positive, and that's something we had to fight against. Which I think we achieved. And then came 2 years of trying to get that book published, because nobody wanted to touch it, because it was Afghanistan. And no fault of ours, no fault of the publishing companies, but there is a lot of books that were published about Afghanistan, and it dried up the well. And we wanted a Canadian publisher. Mir engaged his agent, who's in New York, to help us engage with the publishing companies, because they're more apt to talk to him than us. So that was good, but we needed to keep the Canadian theme to it. And we went publishing company after publishing company, positive, we really enjoyed what you had to say. The book is good. It's something we'd be interested in, just not right now. And that's fine. We were down to one last shot, and Phil Halton from Double Dagger Publishing, who also supported John Barnes and Steve Macbeth with their publications, was, I'm all in. I will take care of this for you. And he ensured it was edited, the cover art was appropriate. Side story, the guy on the cover was actually not a qualified sniper. I'll finish that story so it doesn't leave anything open-ended, but when I deployed in 2006, this is from Medusa, I didn't have enough qualified snipers to fill my lines with the appropriate people. There were sergeants, warrants, master corporals that were qualified snipers that would have done an amazing job, but the battalion is still the mothership, and those guys are tasked. They have roles. And I'm out of corporals. What do I do? And this individual, Cash, he performed incredibly well on the course. And unfortunately, he was not successful in stalking. And is that a concern? Absolutely. Stalking is the baseline for tactical movement. I hope they never get rid of it, because it teaches you in whatever environment to plan, move, communicate, do all the things that you need to do as a soldier. He was unsuccessful there, but was super successful with the shooting and all the other qualities that come with a sniper. So I brought him. He was the first one with a confirmed kill in Afghanistan from our group. And it seemed fitting to put him on the cover, given the effort that he put in, and then understanding when he came back, we can't make you a sniper. We tried to PLAR the qualification, and I agree and disagree within the same breath, but the standard has to be withheld. He didn't want to go on another course, so unfortunately, he didn't get the qualification of a sniper, even though he was employed as one for 9 months. So that's the interesting story behind the cover. So Double Dagger went all in with us, and it took about 8 months to get the book appropriately covered, published, or correction, edited, and then published, and onto Amazon. And we're like, we made it. We are on Amazon. And then nobody was buying the book. It eventually picked up. We did some presentations, and then the interest has grown. And we are incredibly happy with the finished product, unfortunately, of which I have none here to offer. However, it is available in Indigo, Kohl's, Barnes & Nobles, and Amazon, of course. And that is ultimately the story of our book and how it came to fruition. And then a little bit of background on why we did what we did. And another interesting story about the pictures. The top picture was in 2010. I shouldn't find humor in this, but I do. We were being targeted by our own forces. It was a blue on blue situation. Because of the small group that we were in, we would hide, and they would see movement, and then we would get targeted. Communication is probably why I have the sweats on my back. Through communications and just hunkering down, it always got resolved. The bottom picture is in 2006, where we had to scurry into a compound because there was 2 Apaches trying to light us up. And the radio is actually outside the compound, and the mic is coming into the building, and we're trying to confirm our location to those guys. So just to add another level of interest into what we had to do to get there. And that probably went really fast. Are there any questions or anything anybody wants to discuss? Yes, please.
Thanks for the great presentation. Just curious on why Meir felt it was difficult or impossible for him to write true stories like ours when he had written other stories similar for other serving members in other forces. Is this a sentiment, or what does it boil down to?
He felt that he didn't have the lingo, or he didn't have the understanding, because we do things different. He's an American Ranger, his background, and went into a scholastic career. You know, when you look at the U.S. Army Sniper Course, it's a canned product. You look at the U.S. Army Sniper employment, it's very singular. You look at the Canadian sniper experience, there's no boundaries. And he had a hard time dealing with, well, you can't do that. Well, we did that here. And he didn't have the verbs needed to understand the Canadian sniper. He probably got tired of us telling him you can't write that, it's not true, or that's not how it happened. He was very honest with us, and we appreciated that. And he was a great mentor in like focusing us on what should be in the book.
Yeah.
But his background wouldn't have done justice. And I'll be honest, the third person kind of storytelling, as opposed to the first person storytelling that's in the book, wouldn't have made it as impactful. The words in the book are from the author. They are unchanged. They are spell checked and fixed for grammar, but those are our words. That's my sentence, that's my meaning. And I think ultimately when it came out that way, it was much more impactful.
Thank you.
No worries, yeah.
How long is your sniper course, or can you say?
Yeah. So it's around 2 months long.
2 months.
Generally, they'll run a 10-day-ish pre-sniper course to give the candidates a bit of an introduction into what is expected, some of the weaponry, roles, tactics, to better set them up for success. I just had the opportunity on Tuesday to go out to Delta Range, Garrison Petawawa, and sit with the pre-sniper course for lunch and talk about the things that they're going to experience through the course and how to better prepare them and understand what it is. Stress is a crusher on the basic sniper course. Because of the way it's structured, you could be doing a shooting test, and in the back of your mind, you know that afternoon that you're being tested on stalking, and suddenly you fail shooting, but you still need to pass stalking. And that eats an A-type hard charger, leaps tall buildings, eats them up. And sometimes they don't recover. And then they get into a snowball of, I'm not doing it, I can't make it, I'm gonna fail. So I think I had that opportunity when I did my basic sniper to have snipers from previous years come and talk about it. And the beauty of it, from 1999 to 2026, we can still talk all the same language and bring the same lessons learned to these guys to make sure that they're successful, which is wonderful.
When you were talking about being up on that hill for so long and only coming down 3 times, I wonder how do you manage to keep your focus and not go completely nuts when you're just in that spot?
Great question, and I'm going to add a little boost to it. Is there any signals, people in the group? Yeah. So it was an RRB location, and I was the security person. So I kept my focus through their interaction. Their primary job was to maintain that RRB and communications from the south side to the north side of the hill. Sometimes it was hard because when it was time to, do a weekly instruction on the 84, C6, the weapons that we had up there that I needed them to employ should we come under attack, or that there was a stand to, I need them to know where to go, what to do, how to communicate. Sometimes that was frustrating because it wasn't their primary role, and that's cool. The hill was a different dynamic. For the longest time, we didn't have clean water up there, so we didn't shave. We had beards, we smelled. And the TV Tower Hill was 2 peaks. So the TV Tower Hill was, one side was our RRB with the Germans. The other side was the ANA, Afghan RRB communications. So between the 2 hills was an ANA, AMF checkpoint. So to get to us, you had to go through them. And that was problematic because we had the best view of Kabul in the entire country, entire city. And everybody wanted to come up. But they're not going to let you unless we tell them you're coming. And that was a weekly event. And that, maintaining that communication between myself and I always call him the mullah, that was responsible for that checkpoint, that maintained my focus because that was our safety. If I kept a good relationship with them, then they would look after us. It was in their best interest keep the hill moving the way it was, rather than have this standoffishness. And are there any RCDs in the room? So one day, two coyotes came up the hill. Normally we get a call from ops down in the headquarters, not the Julian International Headquarters. We'll get a call and they'll say, you know, Colonel whoever's coming up, this group's coming up. And I would go down on the checkpoint and I would meet them, smooth the waters. We also only ever used our first names on that hill for OPSEC. They don't need to know our last names. There was a lot of people being called at home saying your husband or wife is killing Afghans, and you don't need that. So for OPSEC reasons, we just used our first names. So I was up in the RRB, and suddenly there's a banging on the door of the kitchen. The RRB was an old restaurant. And there's the mullah, sweat, because he just ran up the hill. And he's like, I need the GORD. And that was the first time I realized that my name was a position. And he's like, where's the GORD? So I come running out, I got all my gear, and he's like, trouble. And you're in a different culture, that's fine, you deal with it. They're handsy. So he grabs my hand, and now we're running down the hill, hand in hand, to the checkpoint. And there's a RCD warrant losing his mind. Knife handing. You're gonna let me through this checkpoint. Master Corporal Cullen is on his way coming down. The GORD's coming. And when I get there, there's an AMF soldier in the low ground with an RPG. And he's ready to go. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we need to de-escalate this immediately. But the warrant was having nothing. He didn't want any part of it, didn't want to listen to RCR Master Corporal. So I managed to get him to come down off the carrier, go off to the side, explain the situation, the proper procedure. I also radioed back up to our RRB to get a hold of our ops, to get a hold of his ops, to get on the radio and say, you need to beat it, because you are unwelcome right now, and you're causing a problem that's going to take weeks to fix. So throughout all that, guy in the low ground, ready, we managed to cool him off, move him off the hill, had tea with the mullah, broken English, tried to explain the situation, back up, spent an hour writing an AR, sent that down to our ops, and then obviously new rules came out about the hill. It is completely off bounds, out of bounds. When Adrienne Clarkson came for a visit, she was announced. So that's how I maintain my focus on that hill. Yes?
Can you tell us what firearm that is there and what equipment's on it?
Yeah, that's a 338. We call it C14, 338. It's got a Schmidt & Bender 5, that's 525, could be the 312. Suppressed, that was the main sniper rifle. Also, fun fact, 1RCR was the first Green Army unit to deploy with the 338 to Afghanistan. That, if I also remember right, is Root Brown. Yeah, I think so. Yep. So the Argandab would be just at the end of that. And that's the hill that is on is called Spurwingard. Very, again, in 306, very active area. When we first went there, it was in support of the ODA, an American group, as they tried to expand their movement to the west. And you'll hear a lot of stories about Zangabad Gar, Spurwingard, Masumgar off in the distance. And that's the location. Cool. Yes?
Fine. You said you trained Ukrainian snipers here.
Not myself.
No, but
yeah.
Canadians did.
100%.
And this morning, I don't know if you read it in the Citizen, they had an article where Associated Press interviewed the general that's in charge of the drone forces in the Ukraine.
Right.
And I'm sure you've read lots of these as well here too, and they're basically taking over the war. Like 2% of the forces in the Ukraine now are the guys running the drones.
Yeah.
And they represent, I was amazed that there's 30 to 35% of the kills right now in the Ukraine.
100%.
And that's changing warfare altogether. And just last week they had another article, and they talked about the drones. They can stick them into a building, whatever, underground in a bunker, whatever, and they have, these are the ones that are on the ground versus, and then they have the other ones up in the air that are basically watching and waiting. And right now, basically, soldiers and tanks and artillery are basically targets for these drones.
Yeah.
And the snipers, like they use sniper robots. I'm going, what the?
Yeah.
And they just sit there for 3 or 4 days until they become active. They don't need food, they don't need water, they don't need to go to the washroom.
Yeah.
The only thing they need once in a while is somebody has to give them ammunition if they use up the ammunition and that. But I'm just curious as to if you've talked to any of these guys in the Ukraine, if you've read these articles and that, what do you think about that and the way that warfare has changed now in the last 3 or 4 years because of what's happening in the Ukraine?
Absolutely. Hurts my sniper soul a little bit. So, when I was the program manager for the CSOR snipers, and drones started, this is 2020, started to become noticed. Not employed to the capacity they are now, but noticed. We were in a conference in Washington, and it was a conference that we used to attend that dealt with rapid procurement to deal with immediate issues. And I was sitting next to my counterpart, Lieutenant Colonel, and we were talking about how to deal with drones. And also, how do we increase the engagement range because of this, of the snipers? Because we were looking at how to get out to how do we shoot out to 4,000 meters? And a very talented ballistician in the US, Brian Litz, had been contracted to create a weapon system. It's all open source, it's on the internet. And it was called the ESO system, Extreme Sniper Strike Operations. So while we were talking about that, there's 2 British SF representatives, reps behind us, and crushing blow. They said, if I'm gonna hit anything that far away, I'm gonna send a drone. And we fell silent. Like, what? And it wasn't that they were crushing our sniper souls. It was that was the realization that there's going to be some sharing of responsibility. And when, in that example that you give, I didn't read the article, but I understand the situation. In that situation where you have an AI device that is able to come to life and engage a target, that's all it is. That's not a sniper. And I'll always argue that point. That thing, as good as it is, still requires a power source, still requires information, cannot act autonomously, let's hope. Snipers, like our primary role as a sniper is intelligence gathering. We develop situations. We're able to get to where that same piece of equipment is, but pull out all the information needed to maybe even employ that piece of equipment. We can go far longer on a couple liters of water and a handful of granola than that piece of equipment will ever. And we're capable of developing and acting on a situation instead of waiting for whatever the machine learning was for a torso, or whatever that machine learning was for enemy. We're able to see into what would be hidden from that and extract the information in order to deal with that. My concern is with the advancements, and we look at the Apache that went down, the US Apache, recovered by a drone boat So we are leaning so far in that direction. I worry that snipers are going to get shelved again because it's a low-cost, low-impact weapon. Nobody, and I apologize, nobody attends a ramp ceremony for a drone. And the public would enjoy that. So, I hope that answers. Yes?
Do you have the impression that the armed forces have a good corporate memory? The things that you did, were they recorded in a way that would be satisfactory for you, for corporate long-term memory? Or do you think that the memory is passed just from brain to brain as people come through the system?
I appreciate where you're coming from that question as well, given your previous employment. Unfortunately, I believe it's past, it's recorded, 100%. The war diaries, all that information has been recorded, documented, stored, it's there. Lessons learned was super active during all those conflicts. But when you get down to the ground truth of it, it's not uncommon to hear someone say, I don't want to hear another Afghanistan-ism. And I also get that because a lot of the things that we did or our role was specific to that theater, and those actions were necessary for that area. But because of that, there's a bias. I think there's a small bias in what was learned. My day job, my retired person's job, is deck commander for a group called Cubic, and I run the simulation out of an urban operations site in Petawawa. So we see a lot of training come through that urban site. And one of the first lessons we learned in Afghanistan is you can't carry everything. And that was a game changer for us. We had to learn what we need to be effective on the battlefield for that specific mission. And we're supporting an exercise, and we see the snipers come in with these monster rucks, trying to belly through a window or get up a set of stairs quickly, and they're failing. And that was unfortunately the first lesson we learned, and it's already been put by the wayside. And that's not across the board. That's just one instance that we saw. But I think I would lean towards the point that it's personality-based lessons learned. Unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yes?
Given the circumstances you were working under, like extreme heat, having the best equipment, but given the terrain, given the heat, given the conditions that you were working under, had you learned or were you instructed on the importance of diet? For example, water and granola is one thing, but if I'm going to have some water, I'll throw in some
100%.
mineral salts.
Yeah.
So I have those electrolytes. You might be in a position for a long time. You're going to be subject to cramping. I know one thing that'll help everybody. If I have a can of Coke or a Pepsi,
Yeah.
and it's got phosphoric acid, it blocks the magnesium from doing what it's supposed to be doing, and I know I'm going to have a muscle cramp in the morning.
Yeah.
Anybody that's had that, ouch. You don't want that happening when you're stationary in a position a long time.
Yeah.
Have you developed this sort of, were you instructed about the importance of those nutraceuticals and keeping your physical attributes at peak performance under those conditions?
It was instructed. It was available, not initially. Again, there was some self-learning in there. Within the, snipers and, I don't want to say elite. A lot of you can define a lot of military roles as, or positions as athletic or athletes. And in the sniper role, you're very much an athlete, and you have to treat your body as such. In 2003, that maybe didn't come to the forefront. Even in 2006, in my experience, it was a lot of self-learning of what do I actually need to consume to maintain my focus, which is the big one, and then my body, in order to be effective. Now, there's a much better program in place. There's specialists that produce instruction on that sort of thing. I'm not going to let anything out of the bag here, but in CANSOFCOM, there's a specific high-performance group that's focuses on maintaining athletic capability within the soldiers. So it would have been nice to know more in those theaters, because a lot of the time, and this is, what's your background? You don't mind?
General.
In 1999 in Kosovo, myself and Dave went out on OP for 3 days, and we took some water and some Ritter bars, which was chocolate, and we survived for 3 days. We didn't have a very good time after that, but and that was terrible. And I wish somebody had told us something back then, but that was our staple because we knew it would keep us awake. There was enough sugar in our system, and we would stay hydrated. And I wish that we had that kind of instruction back then. It would have been life-changing. But very happy to know that that sort of instruction and support is now the commonplace. It's very important.
More in the forefront.
Yeah,
Of course,
100%.
those nutraceuticals, because you want to have your optimum performance
Yep.
and endurance and the concentration, and if you're lacking in some of those things, it might wane. So you have to be as well tuned as the machinery.
I would 100% agree.
And I'm sure maybe today you've learned more things about that, and then
Yeah,
what you're eating, and it's all
absolutely.
about diet. I know my
Yeah.
doctor keeps blaming the diet.
Yeah.
It's a hard discipline.
And the proper diet for the role you're in. That diet might look different from a marathoner, but you know, if you're going out on operations, you may want to maintain a high-calorie diet, that sort of thing. But yeah, 100%.
Yeah, magnesium's the big one.
Yep.
It plays about 300 different roles in the body, so it's very important.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. I wish I knew. Yes.
It seems hard to believe that we're approaching the 20th anniversary of Medusa, 25th anniversary of Canada entering Afghanistan, well, getting ready to enter Afghanistan. I was just curious, I mean, it's great that this book arrives because it's talking about that period and that transition from semi-permissive to a slightly different environment. I was just curious about yourself and the community of snipers broadly. How are you approaching that anniversary? What are you taking from that?
I'm glad it's being acknowledged. It was a pivotal point in that theater of operation, and having been there, I always feel that it was a pivotal point in our history. So I 100% support. I'm pretty sure the museum's also leaning toward, in July, there's a...
He's the historian,
see,
Andrew Birch.
yeah. So I'm going to be in full attendance on the Friday in September in Petawawa. I would like to be here for the display. I did see a post about artifacts still being required. Unfortunately,
Ryan Dubra?
yes, Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a conversation. It was for a public program related to our big weekend of off-road vehicles, so it'll be a big bit of a splash, and go get it.
Yeah, he is motivated. He mounted my medals. We've been friends for a long time. He was one of my 2IC when I was at the leadership school teaching PLQs. He was great. I think recognizing it and giving it value for us that were in attendance for it, it may jog some poor memories or bring up some things that we weren't ready to deal with, but I think it's healthy being part of it. And then seeing like faces that you haven't seen for 20 years or more, you know, or hearing the stories. When we were with the pre-sniper course on Tuesday, one of the instructors, we mentioned a couple things. One of the instructors came over and he's like, I was on that patrol and I remember that. And I think he was very happy that what happened. And I think having that celebration or acknowledgement of the events will bring more of that forward and create that closure with some maybe lingering feelings that people have. No worries, yeah.
Well, I've stood up so that I can, just kind of close this down now. First of all, because the used bookstore is still open on the other side. The Friends run a used bookstore, so I'll just share that with you, that it should still be open. Second of all, because I get the pleasure on behalf of all of you here of thanking Gord for coming today and also giving him a gift certificate for the used bookstore.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.